Hello, lovely dance people, and welcome to David's Dance Podcast. I'm your host, David Evans. We have a wonderful Belgian dance artist with us today who's been here in the UK since 2012. She, in addition to her own work, she's the creator of the collaborative Company Concentric. She has such an interesting approach to choreography, and one that upon viewing her works, I can really only describe as poetry, and not just poetry in the sort of romantic, fluffy sense, but poetry really in the sense of presenting the audience with a sort of carefully crafted succession of feelings and moments and chances for connection. And that's sort of like maybe a haiku here or a free verse here, all really through the medium of movement, and really with the sense of presenting a series of moods and atmospheres that just ultimately leave you wanting more. I'm so pleased to introduce this next artist, Yanaëlle Thiran. Yanaëlle, welcome.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the brilliant introduction.
No worries. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Give us a correct pronunciation.
You pronounced it really well. I'll just say it the way I say it. Yanaëlle Thiran.
Thiran. Oh, very nice. Okay. Actually, the name Thiran, what does that mean?
That's a good question. Spelt the way it's spelled in my surname, it doesn't mean anything. But if you wrote it Tyran, Tyran would be often used to speak of a king or a ruler that's really mean and really mischievous, and yeah, it's not a great name.
Oh yeah, like a tyrant.
Tyrant, yeah.
English, yeah. I think there's kind of a European, Proto-Indo-European name, Theron, which exists in different languages of different spelling, and that means hunter. So I thought, oh, maybe it means hunter, like, although I hadn't seen your spelling of the name. Anyway, a little bit of etymology talk to kick us off, but I really wanted to start with a question, and one of the things that I saw on your website and that I thought was brilliant and that you state up front is you asked the question, why dance? Tell us, why dance? Why is dance so important, and why did dance come to you, and how did you get into it?
Big topic, first thing.
Yeah, big topic.
I'll try and be concise on that one. I think, yes, the idea of why dance is something that I think about quite a lot. And I like the fact that my first name begins with the letter Y. It's kind of key to me and who I am, this thing of the why. So I wonder why in terms of the practice of movement itself, and then why as an audience member. Why do I go to these shows? Why do I want to attend these performances? Why do I want to take class with these people? So in the practice of being an audience member, being a dancer, being a choreographer, being a human being, and seeking some sort of meaning and value in what I do. I think my why at the moment, but it changes over time, is mostly to keep connected with people and to give something to young people in particular, because I do teach in primary school, secondary school, and studio settings, to give these people something that is special, that is different to the other topics that they will be learning at school, and something that they can learn from for a long period of time. I think that's the reason why I chose dance over other things as a career path, because I felt like I could really go on with it for my whole life, and I would never get to the end of it. I could constantly learn new things, meet new people, go deeper in the technique, and in the artistic practice as well. Whereas with other subjects, I was very interested in languages. For example, at school, I would really enjoy learning Dutch. And then when I learned English, when I went to Italy, I was learning Italian. I got fascinated by all sorts of languages, but they didn't give me the same sense of an all-round opportunity to grow, learn, and develop as a person, as an artist, and all of that in one package in a way.
And what do you think it is about dance that allows this room for kind of personal development or growth of different kinds? Like I know for myself, I think dance came to me at a really crucial time. So I transitioned into dance. I did gymnastics when I was younger, stopped doing that, and then got really into art for a little bit. And then sort of my mid-teens got into dance. And it was at a time when I was really like angry. I was this like really angry young man, just like pumped up, full of like testosterone. And I sort of needed kind of like an outlet from my physicality and for everything that I was feeling. And I found that like dance was really the only thing that was kind of helping me deal with that anger. And it wasn't like anger in like a sort of sinister or like hateful sense. It was really just aggression. It was just I had a lot of aggression that I sort of needed to put somewhere. And then dance sort of like emerged, and I found that like when I was dancing, I was just like a much, much happier person. And so like, I mean, that's kind of an example of the way in which dance can be kind of like a form of therapy. It can be just a part of like our well-being. And sort of what ways for you is, dance a part of our development as people, do you think?
I think for me, it's mostly about the relational aspect of dance and dance teaching as well. It's funny that we practice dance in our living rooms and bedrooms at the moment, because usually it's the thing that you practice in a room full of people. Obviously, I have made solo works as well, and a lot of it is about finding yourself and how yourself in an empty room is enough. But I think a key element is how you relate to other people through dance. Are you able to really understand the way they're moving, find that connection with them, and embody that and process that in your own body? Or are you able to establish a sort of connection, even though you might be very different movers, you might be very different people, but can you still relate? I think for me, that's the essence of it, the aspect of relation. And if you see someone that inspires you, then that's where you find your journey to them. And that's how it leads to potentially that learning, that transformation, that journey that you then go on.
Yeah, you touched on like an amazing point, which I think is, and it's this interesting point in collaboration and dancing with others, where in the artistic process, I think there's this really kind of teetering point between it can't be frictionless, and you need a certain amount of friction and a certain amount of tension to sort of make it work. And people think, oh, I just want, I want a creative partner that isn't, is just going to help me accomplish my vision. And that can be one thing, but it's not really collaboration when that happens. That's kind of just, you getting an assistant choreographer. But when collaboration's really alive, there's actually a certain amount of, not necessarily not relational tension, but creative tension that can really keep a project alive. Because a lot of the center of creativity is kind of just like throwing a spanner in the works and then going, now let's figure out how to do this or play with this idea. And it seems to me, obviously, that collaboration really kind of energizes your work. Why is collaboration, do you think, so important and energizing? Why is it such a crucial starting place to the work that you create?
That's a good question. I think it is about putting the work first rather than putting myself and my ideas and what I like to do first. So I think the tendency, if I was working solo or just by myself without collaborators, would be to just think, oh, I like that move, that feels good, I'm just going to put it there because I like it, not because that's what the work needs. Whereas if we're in a collaboration, all of us around the project will be thinking, oh, is that really fitting with what we're trying to do? Oh, how about this? We'll really put the work's needs first. And that will push each of us individually towards things that we might not have come up with otherwise, or that might not have been our preferences. And I think that's when it gets exciting, and when it gets unique as well as a piece of work that comes out of different people's ideas, different.
It's almost like the work is the third person in the partnership, you know.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like your collaborator or collaborators, and then there's the work, and it's kind of, you know, it can be the kind of boss in a way, but I think there's something kind of beautiful about that, and sometimes people say, well, what do you mean the work is in charge? And I think really for choreographers and artists, what we sort of mean by that is kind of having a certain amount of intuition to trust the creative process, and that the work will kind of emerge and take care of itself. You know, I think some of the writers that I really admire really talk about not writing the novel that they want, but really creating characters, and then asking the question, oh, in this situation, would that character really do that, you know, or would they do something else, and sort of feeling led by the characters, even though they're, you know, the characters are fictional. Having that approach really allows us to like have a approach to work which is quite kind of intuitive. And intuition doesn't mean like wishy-washiness. I think sometimes when people talk about artists being kind of intuitive, we sort of think, oh, they're sort of airy-fairy and, you know, it's trusting your soul. And maybe that's like a genuine part of it, and that's like totally fine. But in many ways, intuition is sort of the conscious mind stepping aside and you trusting the subconscious mind to work. You know, our brains are mostly the subconscious mind working, doing, you know, 90% of the heavy lifting, and then it makes a decision, and then it informs your conscious brain about it. And it's sort of almost getting out of the way of our own intellect and trusting our brains as well to be able to problem solve and find connections that our conscious mind may not have yet become aware of. But when it articulates itself in the work, we start to recognize it, you know. And you've probably had this experience of creating work and then sort of doing something and going, I don't really know sort of why we're doing this yet, but maybe sort of afterwards the meaning or the feeling or what the work is sort of starts to kind of reveal itself. Do you sort of have that experience? What's your like sort of relationship with intuition, and do you find you're quite a heady person with your work? Are you very much like, okay, we're going to work with this idea, or are you maybe more like of a material choreographer? Do you like sort of, okay, I'm going to work with movement today and the ideas will come later? What's your approach?
I think, first of all, an important thing to say is that my work is very rarely narrative. So when we discuss all of these things of themes emerging in the process, I think that can only happen because there is no storyline, there is no script at first. And then I work a lot through improvisation, often, very often, in response to music. Music inspires me tremendously, or with props and materials. So recently with Company Concentric, we've been playing with long pieces of cloth, and the motion of the cloth, the way we had to move our bodies to activate all of these shapes, all of these things in space, was the main starting point to then choreograph and create the work.
And that was your work, Remainder?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, that's available on Yanaëlle's website as well, if you want to click through and give that a watch. It's like definitely worth a watch. Really interesting work. Sorry, I cut you off.
No worries. Yeah, so that was just to say that the starting points really. Then beyond that, once I've sort of let go of the first impulses and improvised and filmed lots of improvisations, I will go into more structure. I like to score. I like to know precisely if this section is going to last 12 seconds or 35 or 3 minutes. And once I've got the time chunks of the piece, I can start refining each one in more detail, because obviously in any one rehearsal, I might not be able to go through the whole piece, but I will think, okay, let's focus on those 2 minutes, that little section, and then kind of refine. So I like to work from a lot of material, a lot of improvisation first, and then establish that structure so that the sort of cleaning and tidying up of each section can happen within that structure.
So to use the sort of writing analogy, again, it's sort of like stream of consciousness in the beginning, and it's just writing and writing and writing, sort of journaling in a way, and then sort of taking that and sort of structuring that into kind of poems. And I think poems was actually, you talked about it a bit, it was the perfect analogy for your work, because as you said, your work is non-narrative. And one of the things I think that's really interesting about your work is non-narrative, but it's not abstract or formal. It's really humanness and connection, and our connection and being with others is still very much at the center of the work. And I found watching your work, although I really had the feelings of watching a dramatic performance, of watching, it didn't feel like sort of theater in the sense of like, oh, I'm acting now, or this is like a sort of performance or a mimerade, but kind of in the sense of watching like, a piece of theater in which I'm having these kind of feelings of watching people interact and have a connection, this kind of feeling of atmosphere, of emotions evoked, but also not hung on a narrative structure, and instead kind of, as you said, using sort of the grammar of choreography to sort of clip and truncate and frame. I think that's something that you're really good at as an artist, and that is really difficult in the beginning as a choreographer, is composition. It's composition in time. It's finding a way to craft movement phrases to say, you talked about a phrase being 12 seconds long, and how do you know that, like, 12 seconds, like, that's enough?
That's a good question. Yes. Or then also I'll get feedback or discuss with other artists, and they'll be like, you could have put way less material in your piece. You could have just developed those 12 seconds. And what if that had lasted 5 minutes? So I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah, Mary and I talked about that last week. And especially in the early developments of like a work, that's always like a point of frustration. You have like all these different offerings, and it's because you're being creative and you're trying to really be ambitious, and you're offering lots of ideas. And then people watch it and they're like, oh, I love the piece, but there was about a 1 minute sequence that I absolutely loved, and I just wish the whole piece was that. But that kind of thing feedback can be really helpful when you sort of transition from creating sort of scratch works or like small to medium sized works to full length works, because it sort of gives you the points of, okay, the audience is really responding to this idea in a really visceral way, and so it helps me know sort of what I want to kind of develop and work on as an artist. It's kind of, I think it's quite useful in that way. I was really just switching a little bit. I really wanted to talk about one of your works in particular that struck me immensely. I'm struggling to remember the title. I have it in my notes. It was the work that you did at Chichester.
Oh, Halprin's Imprint.
Yes, Halprin's Imprint, which is about the San Franciscan, San Franciscan dance artist Anna Halprin. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'll let you speak about the work, but actually, you tell us about the work, and then I'll say sort of how I sort of responded to it.
So very briefly, Anna Halprin is, yes, an American dance artist who was born in 1920 and turned 100 last July.
Wow.
And I was fascinated to read about her work, watch some of her work online, because it is a lifelong journey. It is a lifelong inquiry, not just into making choreography, but into relating to people as well, using dance as a way of connecting, as a way of healing in the later stages of her life. And I think for me, if I could live until I'm 100 and still carry on doing what I'm doing, relating to people, bringing them together for dance events, I would have been really, really happy all my life, I think. So in that context, I chose to create a duet with an older dancer, Jackie Richards, who is now 72 years old. At the time when we performed together, she was 71. Either way, sort of in a later stage of life, but very engaged with dance still, and very interested in collaborating with me. So we worked together in the piece to have, in a way, two people sharing the same story, sharing the same idea of a lifelong journey through dance. And this was a 20-minute piece.
Yeah, I responded to it quite viscerally. I felt, first of all, you don't see a lot of works with older people in them, which is a real shame. And a lot of that is because so much of dance is centered around the virtuosity of dance, and and understandably, dance is beautiful. Dance can sort of be physically really challenging and can be just really impressive to go and watch and enjoy. And that certainly has its merits. What I sort of loved about the work was that it really deals with this question of dancing throughout life, and with creating work with an older person, but it wasn't sort of tokenism. It wasn't patronizing. I've seen some kind of work with older people, and sometimes it just really frays into this kind of patronizing territory where we sort of treat them like children, or we treat them as past it. And I found it really, really humanizing. I thought Jackie was absolutely wonderful in it. I loved her solo. She gives this like really impassioned solo where you feel that she's really like letting herself go and express herself. And then there's a moment that she says, she talks about her cancer, and then she says something to the effect of, I'm still here now, so I'm going to dance while I still can. And I thought that was just so beautiful. It was such a beautiful attitude to life. And it sort of made me realize, because we do treat dance like a young person's game, and actually that's really limiting in a way, because when we, dance is sort of the expression of the soul. And when we put a limit on dance, we put a limit on ourselves. We put a limit on our sort of ability to express the feeling of being alive. And that's what I found so beautiful, and what I connected with is, here is this woman engaged in this physical expression of what it means to be alive in this moment. And it wasn't so much like, oh, two fingers up to you, death. It didn't feel like a sort of act of defiance. It felt actually really sort of I'm looking for the word, but it felt really sort of uplifting, in the sense of, it felt actually it wasn't a piece about death. It was actually a piece about life, and how dance, because it is so ephemeral, it also makes it very present. Dance brings us into our bodies. It brings us into this present moment and into a present expression. And we're just expressing, I'm alive here and now. And that's beautiful. And that's enough. I thought it was, just a really wonderful sentiment, which didn't feel sort of overly sort of pushed on us in the piece, but sort of kind of, you arrive at that conclusion sort of by yourself. Why was this sort of this theme of dancing and older age and dancing throughout life? How did you come onto this theme, and how did you decide to explore it?
I think, well, first of all, because I'm generally very inspired by other choreographers. I will look at what they did, what their journey was, and then I think I would probably be keen to do more of these kind of biography inspired pieces of work. And then with Anna Halprin specifically, I thought her life journey was particularly inspiring in that sense that she had worked throughout all stages of her life. And I thought, well, why not? Like, how can I also find that sense of empathy and almost identify with an older version of myself, just project myself right there into when I'm 100 and see how I can feel that, how I can put that on stage. And I thought I could not do that alone, obviously. I wanted to work with someone who could take me a little bit closer to that. And Jackie was a brilliant example who, when she retired, actually decided that she wanted to do more dance, set up an older people's dance company, and is still very engaged in lots of dance activities. So I think, again, it's that sense of the relational. When I read about these practices, when I see those choreographers work, how can I take a step that then brings me closer to a felt, embodied and relational understanding of it? And then what emerges from there. And then also I think a concern that is even more prominent now than it was at the time when I made the piece is the idea of, is dance a sustainable career? Is dance even worth pursuing, or should we all retrain and reskill? Well, I think a big problem is that quite often dance projects will be so limited in time. You will be hired for a 1 week R&D and then a 2 week rehearsal process, and then this performance, and maybe that one if you're lucky. And it doesn't necessarily work long term. It is very project based, at least in the independent scene. And what I lack in it sometimes is that sense of, I'm on a lifelong journey. I want to dance until I'm 100, as I say it in the piece. So how do I find ways of keeping that journey, keeping projects coming, of course, but with a long-term vision, not just, oh yeah, I'll only just do that until I'm 45 and then I'll change job. So that also is what I'm exploring in the piece. How do we make dance relevant at all ages, at all stages of life, not just at the peak of, say, in your mid-20s, mid-30s, when you're performing, when you're making, and then that's it.
Yeah, I found that sentiment really, really helpful, actually, and really sort of anxiety reducing. I think because a lot of us dancers, and I entered sort of dance later by sort of industry standards, you know, and that seems kind of like a silly thing to say as someone who's, you know, only 27, but still, I think there is this pressure, as you say, to sort of hit your peak early, to sort of make it now, and it's about sort of reaching the top of your work. And I think it really reiterated to me, actually, it's not a competition in a sense, you know, being a choreographer. It's are you creating work of value? And if so, yes, then keep on creating work of value. And sort of, I found it really helpful in that sense of pressuring ourselves less with the need for acceptance of our choreography, the need for kind of accolade, and sort of focusing on, you know, can we just create valuable work throughout the whole stream of our life that has value? And I think that's really important to sort of not create work that ends up becoming sort of grabbing at short-term gains and becomes about sort of just appeasing other people, or being to the industry taste, or being sort of or falling into sort of fads, really, or just trying to do the next thing, you know, chasing kind of originality or creativity because it's
different and not because of what it can actually offer that's new. So I found it as a sentiment because, it is a competitive industry. I found it a really helpful one, genuinely. It sort of like helped me go, okay, David, you can pace yourself.
You've got another 70 years to go,
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I hope so. But yeah, that really is the feeling. And it's also at the center of, like, you talked about how we value dance in society, and this like sort of patronizing question of like, oh, when are you going to move on to something else, when you're going to get a real job, and sort of all these kind of questions that we sometimes get. Tell us a little bit more. Why do you think dance is valuable, and what are we missing? What are politicians, what are educators missing? Why is dance so often first on the chopping block and the first to go? Why is it so valuable? Why should we keep it at the center of our society more, do you think?
To be honest, I don't think I don't think it absolutely needs to be at the center of society, but I think it's just a really good thing to have as part of society, because for me and for other people, it is the way for self-development and to become a better human being all around, I think. It might not be everybody else's way, and the tricky thing is, it's very difficult to understand how that development happens if you haven't danced yourself. And because not everybody will get the chance or will go into the practice, they might just not see the value and not understand how it works at all, because it can't be described in words, because it is so experiential in nature. It doesn't show results as neatly as some fields and some sectors will do, because they will have figures on a piece of paper. They will, I would say, be more visible or more tangible. But I do think the value is in self-development and in this understanding of others, this sense of empathy as well, that obviously can, again, be developed through reading, literature, drama, all sorts of other avenues. But for me and for those who have more of that sensibility, I think dance is the way towards it. So the problem, or I think the difficulty, is that sense of watching it and doing it is a very different thing. When you watch it, you see the surface. When you practice it, you start to get into the depth of it. And I understand that those who aren't in the practice see the surface and go, well, that's useless, because they haven't got the inside and the substance of the practice.
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier as well, but this idea of, you say kind of development, and it's kind of this essence of finding yourself in a way, and actually how incredibly valuable that was. And I think about when I was growing up, dance was absolutely essential to me sort of finding myself as a person, to sort of me being confident. It was the first time it sort of brought me out of my shell in a way. People don't realize that actually you learn ways of thinking from dance. And actually, I sort of really figured this out with choreography when I was at university, that I really found that choreography could be the framework through which I could understand the world, and through which I could unpack questions that were close to me and that I was curious about, because it is a form of research and it is a way of asking questions. And so it can be the framework through which you kind of approach the world and explore the world. It can be a form of learning. And a lot of my choreography has been sort of that kind of sense of, what big questions are we asking now, David? And how can choreography help us either learn about those things, or just sort of unpack those questions? as well as just all the, there's just a long litany of benefits. The cognitive benefits are absolutely huge. We know short term that doing dance immediately improves your focus and your memory. Doing regular ballroom dance classes in which you're like remembering a sequence is better for delaying the onset of dementia than reading, doing brain exercises, or doing regular exercise like swimming. And I think that's really because it's something to do with the fact that our brains really deal with memory in a spatial way, and dance sort of works that sort of way in which our memory is kind of naturally meant to work, as well as all the social benefits. I mean, dance is such an important medium of kind of social cohesion, but also kind of connection, as you touched on. I mean, so many of us made our closest and long life friends through dance, and it can be just a really I made a lot of my friends. Dance was how I met my wife. It is such a wonderful way to connect with another person. And I think this element of connection is so important to your work. And to jump back very quickly, I thought when you talked about doing more sort of biographical works, it clicked for me for a second, and I was like, oh, that's sort of funny, because Yanaëlle's work as a collaboration is about connecting with another artist in the here and now, and sort of creating a biographical work is about connecting with someone in the past, or sort of, researching or connecting with someone from afar. And so the element of it being about connecting with another person is still very much there and kind of central to the work. I thought.
Absolutely. I mean, the ultimate goal was to then go meet Anna Halprin and perform the work for her, which obviously didn't happen in the year 2020. Yeah. What I did do, though, is I joined her Planetary Dance, which is an event that her daughter runs now every year in July, or around summer solstice in June. And it was on Zoom, so I was able to join. I didn't have to travel to California for that. But it is definitely the drive to create those connections. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be such a cool thing. So, yeah, Anna, if you're listening, shout out. It's so cool, man. Touching on this point of collaboration, you do it really well, I think. Even when we were at Laban, and I'm sort of looking around, and I think all the people I know that are really good at networking in a really genuine way, collaborating in a way that feels genuine. But collaboration is a really tough thing, and a lot of people want to create collaborative works that don't know where to start. And a lot of us have done those sort of forced group projects, at school or during dance training, that were just painful, where we sort of had a group of people thrown together, and they're like, you 5 are together this week and you need to create a choreography. And you end up sort of like this shuffling for power that's really awkward, of who's really going to be in charge, or trying to create a work through diplomacy or through like sort of a council, which doesn't work horrendously well either. And so often we see how much collaboration fails rather than how it succeeds. What is key to the success in collaboration, and how does one find long-term collaborators as you have?
Good question. I think that everyone needs to answer it in their own way. I feel like for me, again, it's about watching, listening to other people's work, and just finding people who inspire me. And for example, when I met Shivangi, the other dancer in Company Concentric, when I met Michaela, our pianist, I just felt like I could be in a studio with them and improvise with them forever, and I would never get bored. Like, we would always find new things. We could have conversations that would go on, and oh, can you think about that? Oh yes, really interesting. And it would just bounce off quite naturally. I think for me, one key aspect as well is to pick collaborators who come from different fields or have different backgrounds to mine, so that they really enrich me and what I do in many, many ways. Or like, as we were discussing, someone like Jackie, who's an older dancer, someone who's got a totally different life experience will bring so much to the work that I can make with them, rather than collaborating with someone who would have trained with me and had a very similar background and range of movements that they would draw from, where I feel maybe the collaboration would be a little bit more limited. So I think this sense of just generally who inspires you, who do you feel you could work with, and what can you learn from them as well. I'm not an expert in music at all. I cannot read music. I just have a very intuitive feeling for music. And when I work with musicians, that's what happens. I'm inspired by what they do, and then I go, oh yeah, let's try that. Let's see what happens. And then we build those connections.
In a way, it's the best thing for writer's block. I mean, we've all hit that point in the studio when we've been making a work, and we are sick of it. We feel like we've hit a creative wall, or we go, oh, I don't know what to do with this piece. I hate this piece. and then you sort of push. I don't get that with every work, but some of the pieces that I do, sometimes I find when I push through that period, on the other side, the work just takes off, and you sort of need that sort of crunch point in the work to sort of kind of overcome in a way, and then it's almost like then you break through that barrier, and then the work really takes off or finds a new life, or you sort of figure it out. But I think it's absolutely fantastic, kind of, as you point out, as a way to kind of not have to deal with writer's block, because it's so handy when you sort of hit a wall that you have a team of other people who are thinking very differently to you, who can sort of approach the problem or create some inspiration out of nowhere, and just have an offering and say, well, what about this? And sort of it sort of helps to sort of keep the engine of creativity alive and moving, which is so crucial to have really, in order to have really productive studio time and really creative studio time, where you're actually creating something like sort of quite substantial, really. And I felt the quality of your collaboration in your work, because the works, I think, strike a good balance. They don't feel like the work of one person, but they also feel very much cohesive. It doesn't feel like ideas are fighting one another. It does very much feel that it feels conversational. All the different elements in the piece are in conversation with one another. Do you have any advice for artists who want to work with musicians, or set designers, about how you approach those collaborations? Sometimes language can sort of be a barrier, sort of technical language we can get stuck on. I think I realized early on that sometimes I was trying to speak in the other person's language, but sometimes I already had the words. And to sort of use an example, I was working with a ballet dancer once, and this was really before I'd done no ballet at this point. And the piece was really about folding, and this idea of the folding of the limbs and the folding of the body. And I was trying to use sort of the words for it, of like the sort of ballet terms. And then eventually I was like, just, you have the word, it's folding. Like, the other person knows what this is. They have the technical knowledge, let them interpret it. Sometimes you just, how do you find that you get your ideas across best, or you end up sort of sharing those ideas in those kind of cross-platform collaborations?
I think definitely clarifying the words, and also working across words, visuals, sounds. So for example, when we work with set designer and costume designer at Company Concentric, we'll we'll have a mood board. So we'll have like a shared board on Pinterest, for example, and they
cool.
will pin images. And then I'll go, oh yeah, that's absolutely the kind of texture that I think could fit well, or, oh, I love those shadows and the light there. And it is a lot easier to talk through that and have images to refer to than to try and describe at length, oh, I think the atmosphere should look or feel like that. And I think quite often the designers will also come and see what we're doing either in person in a studio or through videos, and that will give them a better understanding of the work than just a description again. So as much as we can, we try to have those images, sounds, maybe little audio files that we can share, just so that everybody gets a sense of all dimensions of the work. And I think also understanding and appreciating that even though we want these collaborations to be very much everyone is on an equal level, we're all part of this circle at Company Concentric, we need to acknowledge that one of us will have the lead role in this and that aspect of the work. And it becomes very difficult to not have a leader, to let the work develop, but to not know who's going to have the final say, who's going to make it cohesive. So that is something that we've been discussing and debating quite a lot. And we do find that, for example, if Michaela, our musician, is very clear on her line for the music, then the choreography can kind of lead, or like, yes, either the choreography has to lead her way and then we tell her exactly what we need, or the music is going to lead the way we set the choreography. So it is about acknowledging when each of us is leading and having that conversation. It's interesting that you mentioned the word conversational, because that's absolutely what I've been researching in my master's dissertation as well. I've just handed in the spectrum really between the monologue and a dialogue or a conversation. So on the one end, you've got the author or the choreographer telling you from beginning to end what they want to tell you, how they want to tell you, what you should understand through it, why you should understand it that way. On the other end of the spectrum, the choreographer, author, or artist is more like a collaborator, really, suggesting ideas, listening to yours as a collaborator, as an audience member, as a contributor. And it is more of a conversation. And there is a whole range in between. So there are levels there. And I'm very interested in consciously finding a place on the spectrum as an artist, as an audience member, as a dancer, rather than just having a default way of working, which I think probably would be more on the sort of author monologuing and just telling my story. I think it becomes more interesting for me when it is conversational, and also when the audience, the receiver, becomes more of a collaborator too, when they can interpret what I'm putting out there, what we at Company Concentric are creating together. If it's this collaboration, we put it there, and then someone else will come and say, oh, wow, that really evoked such and such for me. And again, this is another side of the conversation that the work generates.
I think there's something really key there, which is sort of at the center of it is really this idea of listening, that I think is so important. And it's not always easy. It's not intuitive for everyone. It's not the way everyone can work, but it's a really fantastic thing to have as an artist, as a part of your practice, to practice the act of listening. And that is great to create work that is sort of self-aware in many ways. You're sort of much more aware of what you're creating through, you know, you sort of list off the sort of different people that you're listening to in the process. You know, oh, I'm listening to the musician. Okay, the musician is leading this section. Okay, I'm going to listen to that. Okay, now we're listening to the music. Now we're listening to the set design. That is sort of informing the choreography, you know, the costume. What is the costume offering? How do we listen to that in a sense. You know, what is the audience saying to us? How are we listening to the audience? You know, rather than sort of broadcasting this message out into the ether, and sort of, you know, switching off the comment section, so to speak, switching from a kind of broadcasting model to say, how can we listen to the audience? And I find some of the works that can be really so powerful are the works that do invite the audience in some way and do leave room for suggestion, leave room for conversation. You know, I know in sort of my own work, and you probably found this as well, that sometimes when you offer a little bit less in terms of like, this is what this work is about, people come back with the most amazing ideas. I remember doing an exhibition and intentionally keeping it sort of, I'm a big fan of one-word titles for work and then not having a description, so that the title gives you a bit of a nugget of what the piece maybe is about and some of the ideas behind it, and then not having a description, because I feel that often that's too much information and we sort of explain the piece away. That's just my kind of artistic preference. And I found it really wonderful showing people these sculptures and these dance works, and people coming up to me and saying, oh, in this moment was that about this? And, you know, or I had this idea, and I was like, wow, I wish I had thought of that. Do you ever have those I wish I thought of that moments when the audience comes to you and says, wow, is it about this? Or they make a connection and suddenly you're like, wow, I can't believe
I think
you saw that in the piece and we didn't.
Absolutely, but that's what we have to recognize as artists, that who are we to say this is the intention of the work, that's what you should see in it, audience. I think everybody will be able to see so much and relate things to their own life, their own experience, their own thoughts, what they're busy with at that point in time when they encounter the work. And that's why I always struggle with having to define the intention of my work, because I feel like it's not up to me to say that's the intention. It's something shared. It's, again, a discussion. I will bring an element of an intention, and then others who encounter the work may find that for them, maybe it intended to do something else or to work differently. And it is difficult to acknowledge that, to say, well, I don't know, I can't really tell you what the work's ultimate goal is, but here's the work. It's like one of those big ink stains. There it is. You tell me what you see in it. And there are shapes that I've put them on purpose, but you know, you might see some others.
Yeah, is it Rorschach?
Yes, that one.
Yeah. And I think there's something really important to sort of identify there, is that you're not sort of presenting chaos. You are saying something, presenting a clear idea, but you're sort of leaving room for interpretation or leaving room for the audience's interpretation. It's not that we're sort of giving something vague to the audience and saying, okay, you figure out what this means. We do want to present something like quite clear as artists, a clear offering that people can respond to, while also just allowing a little bit of sort of room for, to invite suggestion for people to fill the work with their own narratives, with their own feelings and their own experiences, and draw their own sort of, you know, affect from it. You know, is one fantastic way of working among many. I think, this has been such a fantastic discussion, and I think especially as we talk about collaboration and wanting to continue this discussion, you're hosting a artist roundtable on December 2nd. Is that right? December 2nd. I think that's a Wednesday, 6 p.m. Tell us a little bit about that and what can people expect?
Yes, so this is a project that started way back in lockdown 1. Myself and my collaborators at Company Concentric were very keen to stay connected, stay in touch, and just discuss topics that we felt were relevant and were intriguing. When we started it, it was about how do we continue collaborating online without being able to physically share a space. And we had a first conversation about that in May. And then every month we have had a different topic since then. So we've covered things like music and dance collaborations, creating screen dance or dance films, and how filmmakers and dance artists might collaborate on those. More recently as well, creating websites and how website designers or graphic designers might help artists. Again, finding that common language and inviting artists from both backgrounds really to come together. So the next one in December is about overall, what have we learned from this crazy year 2020? How have we been collaborating? What are we going to take forward? So it is quite open. We haven't set a specific topic as we usually do, just to keep the floor open. And the conversation is obviously open for contributions. So we welcome people to come in, turn on their camera, turn on their mic, and be active contributors in it. As well as just those who want to listen, tune in, and just process the flow of information. They are welcome to join too, and perhaps just stay on mute and stay off camera. So
awesome.
Absolutely.
We'll put a link to that in the description below. And also, it's so important to be connecting with other people during lockdown. You know, it is a tough time. It is a great way to be connecting with other artists. You know, it's really tough doing it by yourself. I know I've had like difficulty training by myself, you know, being, you know, gyms are closed and sort of training spaces are closed. There's this bandstand in town that I go to to train, and people go sort of, what the heck is he doing? But it's so important to find ways to connect and train during lockdown. You're running classes as well that are online that people can take part in during lockdown or post-lockdown. Tell us a bit about those. What can people expect?
So these classes are aimed at dancers, dance students, recent graduates and professionals. And what we offer currently until mid-December is a yoga class every Monday morning, 9 to 10 a.m. and a floor work, so contemporary technique class with myself and live music by our wonderful pianist every Friday morning from 9 to 10:15. And then we do keep the Zoom call open until about 10:30 to recreate that sense of stretching zone, post-class informal chat and connections again, so time to chat as well. And these classes are free to try. You can just sign up and test the class, have your free trial. If you sign up via Eventbrite, you have that option. And then if you like it and if you do want to come back, we will kindly ask you to donate what you can. It is something that we're very happy to do voluntarily, but we also need to make an income. So yes, we have different payment options, and the plan is to continue in 2021 and to continue delivering online because we don't currently have a studio space as a company. We work from our homes, and we expect that you guys will be doing the same, joining in from your homes.
Yep. A lot of push tables and chairs out of the way and shifting the couch back and rolling the rug up. Oh yeah, that sounds awesome. Where can people follow you on Instagram? Where's the best place to follow you and find out about your work and what you're up to?
Instagram is a good place. I've got my personal account as well as the company's account as well, where I post about the classes and those events. My personal one is Yanaëlle Dance, so my first name and then just the word dance in French. And Company Concentric is just company.concentric. Easy to find. We do have Facebook pages as well, and we do have a newsletter with Company Concentric. So there are links to all of these things on the Instagram bio.
How did you come up with the name Company Concentric?
I didn't come up with it. It's Shivangi's idea.
That does sound like a Shivangi idea.
We have been talking about it.
Quite intellectual.
It's a funny one because we're like, we need to come up with a company name. We had been working together for a year or so. And we were just like, oh yeah, what are we going to call this? And then thinking about Swapping Shadows, the duet we had made together, we were like, yeah, it's sort of symmetry, geometry in it, and there's this bit, this bit where we kind of circle around each other. I was like, yeah. And then randomly she went, filled up her water bottle, came back to that Company Concentric. And I was like, oh, I like it. Yes.
That is cool.
That's how it happened.
Yeah, I think it's great. You have these kind of like, concentric circles. But for me, it sort of evokes this idea of when you chuck when you're a kid and you take or not a kid, and you take a massive rock and throw it into a river or a pond, and then it like goes plop, and then does the sort of ripples going outwards, and sort of the idea of the sort of like presenting an idea and then seeing the sort of outward kind of flow of those ideas. I think it's a good name. It's a good name that you named. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been so great having you on. Just having a good old chinwag and digging into some of these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was lovely to speak to you again. And I think I've personally really enjoyed listening to the previous podcasts as well. So I look forward to the next ones.